Bryan Kohberger is a person who true crime aficionados definitely must have heard of. If you're wondering what he actually did, well, he has been suspected of fatally stabbing 4 students who attended the University of Idaho. But the big question is, where is he now? Join us as we get into the details of the jail life of Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger. For those of you who don't know about the Idaho murders, here's a quick gist of the case. On the 13th of November 2022, 4 students from the University of Idaho were brutally stabbed to death in their off-campus residence that was located in Moscow, Idaho. The homicides were brutal and took place during the night hours. A little over a month later, a suspect in these murders was found. On the 30th of December, Bryan Christopher Kohberger was arrested as a suspect in the Idaho murder case on 4 counts of murder in the first degree. He was also suspected of felony burglary. There was plenty of evidence against him. Some of these bits of evidence include DNA evidence as well as cell phone records that connected him to the crime. In addition to this, there has been quite a lot of surveillance footage that has connected Bryan to these murders. All these bits of evidence are mentioned in a probable cause affidavit that was unsealed in the month of January. Following this, very few details in this case have been released. This is probably due to the fact that a gag order issued by Latah County Magistrate Judge Megan Marshall was passed. This law bars attorneys, law enforcement agencies, and others associated with the case from speaking or writing about the case to the public. This law was further broadened when it included the fact that attorneys representing survivors, witnesses, or the victim's family members were also prohibited from talking or writing about the case. As of now, prosecutors are seeking to convince a magistrate judge that enough evidence for this case has been collected to put Bryan on the stand and to justify the charges against him. This preliminary hearing has been announced to take place on the 26th of June this year. If the judge is in agreement with what was asked, the case will be transferred to Idaho's 2nd District Court. Bryan would also be asked to enter a plea. As of now, the man is leading a secluded life inside Latah County Jail in Moscow, Idaho, following which he will have to attend a preliminary hearing. This 28-year-old suspect also happens to be segregated from the rest of the inmates at that jail. He's also quite privileged to have his own television with a basic cable connection in his space at this jail. One of the inmates had mentioned that DailyMail.com that Bryan stares at himself obsessively on the TV. The inmate stated he watches himself all the time. It's really kind of bizarre. In fact, this may even lead many to believe that Bryan is a sociopath. In addition to this, Bryan is also given the freedom to choose the channel that he wishes to watch. Other prisoners in jail are not given this privilege. The other jailers can only watch what is selected for them. Apart from this, Bryan has been given special access to mental health services. However, a fixed mental health professional has not been assigned to him yet. According to a source, Bryan Kohberger is staying on the low in jail and is doing as he's told. In fact, according to his lawyer, he's waiting to be exonerated. At the moment, Bryan is being held in jail without bail. In the jail, Bryan is held in solitary confinement in the basement of the Latah County Courthouse. Before we get into further details on what Bryan's jail life is like, let's take a quick peek at what is happening with the case. In the month of January 2023, Bryan was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. In addition to this, he was also charged with 1 felony burglary. In the month of December, he was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania as a suspect in the mentioned crimes. Bryan has been accused of murdering Kaylee Gonsalves, 21, Madison Mogan, who's 21, Sienna Kernodle, 20, and Ethan Chapin at 20, all of whom were stabbed to death at a student house in which they resided. Autopsies were conducted by the Latah County coroner on all 4 victims on the 17th of November. According to the coroner, all 4 victims appear to have been stabbed multiple times, which resulted in fatal wounds in the chest and upper body. The weapon used in this murder seems to be a large knife or a weapon similar to it. One victim had defensive stab wounds on her hands, which showcases that she tried to fend off her attacker. These types of wounds were not found on the bodies of the other victims, leading us to conclude that the other 3 victims were attacked in their beds while they were asleep. The 4 victims died due to homicide by stabbing, and no sign of sexual assault was observed. It was also observed that neither of the victims was tortured, tied, or gagged before they were murdered. However, the weapon that was used has not been discovered. The police believe that the murderer used a fixed blade knife to commit the homicides. Back to Bryan's life in jail, the man is said to attend Mass every Sunday at 7 p.m. According to a DailyMail.com reporter, Bryan receives a private mass with a pastor. What discussions they have is unknown to us. In addition to this, he also has been provided the option of attending Bible study on Wednesday evenings. According to a source, there's a whole bunch of chairs and the inmates get to choose whatever chair they want. He gets to choose the chair as well, but he cannot interact with the other inmates at the mass. He can sit there with them in a chosen chair, but he cannot interact. Many prisoners have been asked about Bryan's behavior when he was put in jail. One of the inmates has stated that he has the same expression or has no expression at all. In his words, he just looks straight ahead. I've never even seen his eyebrows or mouth move. He never says anything. In fact, it was also stated that Bryan has been quite polite since entering prison and has not been causing any nuisances to anyone since arriving at the jail. According to a source, Bryan Kohberger in real life is not the person that the media has portrayed. On TV, it has been showcased that Bryan is a skinny person, but in real life, the man looks quite healthy and over 200 pounds. He also looks like a person who's quite imposing. Here's a little bit about Bryan's personal life. The man was a criminology graduate student and would sometimes teach at Washington State University as a teaching assistant. He was teaching at the point that murders took place. During the summer of 2022, Bryan moved to Washington to pursue a PhD at the Washington State University in Pullman. This campus is just under 8 miles west of Moscow, which is where the murders happened. In fact, just 9 days prior to his arrest, he completed his first semester there as a PhD student. 2 weeks prior to the murders, the faculty members who worked with Bryan met with him to discuss certain concerns regarding Bryan's behavior and conduct. Due to his behavior not changing, he was terminated from his teaching assistant role on the 19th of December. The reason for his termination was claimed to be due to his unsatisfactory performance as a teaching assistant. It was also mentioned that he did not comply with the norms of professional behavior when interacting with faculty members, and this was another reason for his termination. The reason why he committed these murders is still being looked into. Maybe once the case is sent to trial, we may get an answer to this question. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the recent developments in the case of Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger, as well as what Bryan's jail life is currently like. Stay tuned to find out what happens next in the case of Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger. Please like and subscribe for more updates on this case and other true crime stories.